Okay.
Right.
Hi guys, I'm Mike from Wye
Hang
Valley.
on, hang on, hang on, hang on, hang on.
Oh,
Right, now go for it.
okay. Hi guys, I'm Mike from Wye Valley Alpacas. And as you can see there, there's a picture. We've got pigs and chickens as well, but I have to whisper because the other animals will get a bit upset. The alpacas are more interesting, and that's who we're here to see today. I've got a map for you just to show you where we are in the world. Over on the bottom left there, Wye Valley Alpaca, as you can see, and we are right on the border between Gloucestershire and Herefordshire, and about 6 miles from Wales. And today it's actually sunny, and it's been raining here for literally the last 3 weeks, so it's actually quite beautiful at the moment. And I'm right on the edge of the Wye Valley and the edge of the Royal Forest of Dean. So on the left-hand picture, which is an aerial photograph of where we are, right at the top right, just above that red dot, is the River Wye. And the trees that you can see around are the Royal Forest. And I'm about 3/4 of the way down that picture on the left-hand side in the tree line. And you may just see a brown splodge. That's now one of our girls' shelters. And the reason I'm with the girls is we've got more of them. They like to show off a bit more to the camera, and I can show you more things about them as we go along. I've got some history for you. This is the world 45 million years ago, and that little creature over on the left-hand side, Protylopus, lived in North America, actually lived in southwest North America. And 45 million years ago, that area was a rainforest. Today, we'd know it as slightly desert with red rocks and cactus, but back then it was a wonderful rainforest. And Protylopus and a couple of other creatures like it were quite happy munching on the leaves and the berries, and they were a small animal, no bigger than a sort of a small sheep, but maximum of about 20 kilos. And as the millions of years moved on, the rainforest started to get smaller, and some of those animals, the descendants of Protylopus, started to move away. They had to walk much further to try and find rainforests. And as they were walking much further away, they started to grow humps on their back. And that was a way of them storing their food while they were trying to find some more. And those creatures moved way, way north, up into the north of America, right above the Arctic Circle. And because there was much less food, they grew even bigger humps, and they could store food for about 6 months in between needing to eat. And of course, the animals with a nice big hump we would know today as our camels. And that's exactly what happened. Those animals followed the purple arrow across the top of the world when it was frozen. And they walked back in on the other side, and they walked through Asia and Africa and all the way through Europe. And the earliest fossils of camels can be found in Spain, dating back 7 million years ago. Now, you might see there, or hopefully you can see a dotted line from India to Australia. We know there are camels in Australia, and of course they couldn't have walked there because of all that water. And they were taken by the British when they went exploring, and they would use them to carry their tools and packs. And of course, once the British had railways and trains, they had no use for the camels, so they just let them loose. And that's why there are 1 million camels living in Australia. Now, whilst all this was going on with the animals with humps, the other half of the that type of animal started to walk southwards, following the green animal. And about 3 million years ago, a very special thing happened in the world, and the piece of land that has Panama on it today rose up from the seabed and joined North America to South America. So about 2 million years ago, Protylopus's descendants moved south into South America, and they became what we know today as the alpacas and the llamas and 2 other animals. So our alpacas are related to camels, and they're all part of the same family called camelids. And back in North America, the rainforests were getting much, much smaller now, and humans had become much better at hunting. So the last of the camels in North America were extinct about 13,000 years ago, and that's why you don't find camels in North America anymore today. And here is the family, the camelids. On the right hand side, we have the camels, really easy to spot, lovely big animals with obvious humps on their back. The dromedary on the right hand side, with its single hump, sometimes known as the African or the Arabian camel, because that's where it's found in the world today. And its closest relative, the Bactrian camel, again, really easy to spot, nice big animal with 2 humps on its back. And that's sometimes called the Asian camel, because that's where it's found today. Now, there is a third camel called the Old Bactrian, slightly smaller than the Bactrian there, and that's on the very endangered list. There's less than 900 of them alive in the world, and they're only found in two small places in the world, a place in China and a place in Mongolia, so very few of them. Back in the days when they were living in North America, there used to be about 30 different types of camel, but we're just left with the 3 now. Along the bottom, we have the alpacas and the llamas. And on our farm here, all of our alpacas are like the one on the bottom left, called a wakaya, and they have a lovely, soft, flat fleece. Their closest relative is the one next to it, the Surrey, a very special alpaca. You can see its fleece goes almost all the way to the floor, and its ringlets are very silky fleece, quite sought after. Next to them, we have the llamas, the chaco and the cacara, and just like the alpacas split into 2, the chaco with the ringlet fleece and the cacara with the flat fleece. Now, I know you can't tell from those pictures, but llamas are much bigger than our alpacas. They weigh about 2.5 times as much, and they're much taller than our alpacas. And the easy way to tell a llama from an alpaca, if you can't tell, is if you look at the llama's ears. Hopefully you can see they're curved, a bit banana shaped, and that's how you tell a llama from an alpaca. Now, the 4 animals along the bottom, you can't find them anywhere in the world in the wild. They've all been looked after by humans for thousands of years, and they're what we call domesticated. So exactly like our cows and our sheep and our pigs, they've been looked after by humans, by farmers. Now, the alpacas were always bred for meat to eat, their fleece to make things with, and for fuel. And the llamas, because they are much bigger, were always bred to carry weight on their back, and they're what's called beast of burden. So they can carry large packs, and they're very good at going up steep slopes. Now, although you can't find those ones at the bottom in the wild, they do have wild relatives. And for the llamas, it's the guanaco, the animal in the middle. Very special animal that's found all the way down the west side of South America, so through Bolivia, Chile, Peru, and all the way down the west side of Argentina, and they're found from sea level right up to the heights of the Andes at just under 5,000 meters. And for the alpacas, their wild relative is the vicuña. It's the smallest of the camelid family. It only comes in that color, which we call fawn, and it has a very special fleece. It's really silky, really fine, and really soft, and it was quite sought after. And because of its very special fleece, the vicuña was hunted, and a few hundred years ago it was dying out. The numbers dropped, but today it's protected under law, and there's about 350,000 of them in South America. And top left is the Peruvian coat of arms, and just so that you know, they're still proud of their animals. In the blue section is a picture of a vicuña. Now, this is a bit of a strange picture to show you, but it'll become obvious why I've got a picture. This is the fleece of an alpaca. Actually, it's one of our alpacas, one of our babies. And if you look at the wavy lines in the fleece, that's called crimp. And the more of that you have, the better the quality of the fleece. And because this is a baby's fleece, it's a very good quality. Now, if I was to stick my fingers in that, they would disappear. That fleece is really long, about 4 centimeters long. And when you see our alpacas, they've recently been sheared, so I can't really show you this. This is one of our alpacas called Mila, and as you can see, she is actually a cub. She's wearing her necker there from the first Royal Forest, and she had an investiture a few months ago in between various lockdowns, and you can just see our Kayla in the background, and we only had one other cub with us, but she had to say a promise. She struggled on a few words, which we helped her with, but she's absolutely loving being a cub, and she's nearly finished her first badge. And of course, she chose alpaca grass eating, but she's a little bit worried. She doesn't know where to sew the badge when she gets it. So what I'm going to do now is end the slide, come back to teams, and hopefully you can see the alpacas now. There we go. So one of the things I was telling you is that alpacas have been looked after by humans for thousands of years, and probably as far back as 9,000 years, right to the early tribes of South America. And the reason we know a lot about the alpaca history is the early tribes are very good at writing about their animals or painting their animals. And they would always paint them in very bright colours, wearing scarves and pom-poms and things like that. And all those thousands of years ago, they were very good at looking after their animals. Although they had some very strange thoughts about them. They thought the alpacas could see into the future, and they thought they would bring them good luck. So sometimes when they do archaeological digs, they might find an alpaca buried under the house. which is where they thought they would bring them good luck. If we move forward a few thousand years, you may have heard of a very powerful civilization called the Incas, and they ruled large areas of South America, and they were fantastic farmers. And in fact, half of the vegetables you eat today were developed by the Incas. But they were also very, very good at looking after animals, what we call animal husbands. And they had lots of gold and silver and gemstones, but one thing they loved more than all of their gold and all of their silver was their alpacas. They really, really loved them, and they were fantastic at breeding them. And they had a special caste of people or trade group, and it was their job to breed alpacas, and they were breeding the very best quality animals they could with the very best fleece that they could. And they back then would have been the equivalent, I guess, of a pedigree animal, just like a pedigree cat or dog today. They were the very, very best they could be. Also, the Incas were very good at using the alpaca fleece. And if you were just sort of the average Inca, all of your clothing would have been made from alpaca fleece, literally from the socks on your feet to the hat on your head, and a huge poncho in between would have been alpaca fleece. And they were so good at making things, they would even make rope from the fleece, and they would turn that rope into rope bridges. So the Incas would cross huge gorges or ravines on bridges made from alpaca fleece. Now, if you were royalty, and if you remember, I told you about the vicuña and its special fleece, all of your clothing was made from the vicuña fleece. And if anybody else was caught wearing vicuña fleece, or even shearing a vicuña, and they were protected by Inca law, they would have been in serious trouble. And the Incas weren't very nice when it came to discipline. So if you were wearing vicuña fleece, some very nasty things would have happened to you, very unpleasant things anyway. And everything was going well for the Incas. They were absolutely happy, and their alpacas were happy. And between the alpacas and the llamas, there were about 50 million animals in South America. So everywhere you looked, and certainly every Inca settlement you went to, you would have found alpacas and llamas. And then, unfortunately, one day in 1532, the Spanish invaded, and they wanted to rule over the Incas. Of course, what they really wanted was all the gold and silver, and they wanted to take it back to Spain. And they didn't understand why the Incas loved their alpacas so much. They just thought they were a bit of a strange shaped sheep with a long neck. But what they did know is that one way to rule the Incas was probably to upset them. And they could do that by killing off all of their alpacas, in fact, all of the camelids in South America. And that's exactly what they started to do. So between the Spanish troops, who started to slaughter as many animals as they could find, and all of the horrible diseases they brought with their own sheep, they killed off about 98% of the herd numbers. So all of the animals, or the South American camelids, almost disappeared. And what the Incas did is they formed an army 5,000 strong, and they took as many of their animals as they possibly could to the heights of the Andes at just under 5,000 meters, about half the height of Everest. And they hid them there for nearly 100 years until the Spanish finally left. Luckily, other Europeans came along and they realized how useful alpacas are and how useful their fleece could be. But during the time that they were hidden, some of the animals escaped, and alpacas can quite happily crossbreed with the llama, the vicuña, and the guanacos. And so the standard of the animals had changed slightly, and the quality of the fleece had dropped. And they became what we call a hybrid animal, or rather rudely, a mongrel. Now, although we are a farm, these animals are actually classified as exotic pets, and they're all chipped. So just like your cat or dog, they've got a chip in them, and because of that, I can check how many there are. And in the UK, we have 45,000 alpacas, which sounds a lot, but it's not as many as sheep. And in the world today, there are about 4 million alpacas. 3 million of those still live in South America, with 1 million spread around the rest of the world. And the alpacas first came to the UK in the 1800s. So when the British went off exploring, they'd quite often, if they went to South America, bring back some alpacas because they were a strange animal, obviously. But nobody knew how to look after them. Alpacas need some very special care in our wet weather, and they need some very special minerals and vitamins. But nobody knew that, so the alpacas unfortunately just died. They next came in the 1950s. and you would have seen them in a zoo. Some rich collectors might have had them, but mostly you would have had to have gone to a zoo to see them. So alpacas are a relatively new animal to the UK, and a herd of about 150 arrived in 1995, which was quite a news article. So these strange creatures turning up, but from there the number in the UK has risen, and so has a number of farms. So one of the things you have to remember with these animals, I told you that they've been looked after by humans for thousands of years, but of course before that they were just a wild animal like any other, and these are or were a prey animal. So other creatures would have been hunting them for food, of course. Things like mountain lions, coyotes and wolves all would have been hunting them, and because of that alpacas developed or evolved some very special senses. And the first one is their hearing, and as you can see they all have lovely big ears, and of course big ears means they've got very good hearing. And I know they've got good hearing because if I shake a bucket of food from 2 fields away, they'll all stick their heads up to see if I'm coming to feed them. And of course good hearing means that other animals couldn't sneak up on them. The other thing they have is very good vision, and really good vision at night as well, very good night vision. And I'm hoping you can see that all of our alpacas have a very dark eye. So unlike us, who all have different coloured eyes, alpacas pretty much all have the same sort of shade of dark eye. And you'll also notice there's no white around their eye, so they don't give their position away when they look left or right. Now, because their eye is so dark, I can't really show you their pupil, but unlike us, we have a round pupil, and alpacas have a rectangular pupil, and that stops them from being blinded when the sun is low. If you ever look at a goat, they have the same shaped pupil. Because they've got a white eye, it's very easy to see. So animals couldn't use the sun to sneak up on them. Now, something else I can't show you because our animals aren't worried, they also have a third eyelid. So if an animal was chasing them that they thought would scratch their eyes, they can close that eyelid to keep themselves protected. So quite a special eye. Now, if you look at this one here, you should be able to see their top lip is split, a bit like a rabbit's, and they'll use their top lip like 2 fingers. So I'm going to give her some food now, and if you watch ever so carefully, she'll jut her lips out, and she'll just use them like 2 fingers so they can move independently. Let's see if that. You'll just see her push her lips out, and she'll very gently pick the food up. So very, very clever. Now, they also, if I can get the right angle, they don't have any top front teeth. Now, it depends which one will nibble me or not. She might do it. There we go. You'll just see that she doesn't have any top front teeth, so it doesn't hurt when she bites me. I don't know if you just saw it, but anyway, they have a hard gum pad, and they use that gum pad along with their lips that move independently to tear off grass or tear off leaves. And they're very clever. They know to tear off the grass because that means it can grow and they've got a constant source of food. Now, although they don't have any top front teeth, in their mouths they have 32 teeth. Most of them are located right at the back of their mouth, where they chew. And when they chew, they sort of chew in a figure of 8 motion, and they're moving the food to the back of their mouth so they can mix it with some spit, some saliva, which makes it nice and easy to swallow. And when they swallow their food, of course, it goes down their nice long necks and into their stomach. And these animals have 3 stomachs. So when they first swallow, it goes into the first tummy, and it starts to mix with all the juices, and it starts to ferment a bit like brewing beer, and they'll start to digest it. And what alpacas can do is they'll bring that food back up, and they can do that about 75 times. They'll chew it a bit more, swallow it, chew it a bit more, swallow it. And it's a bit similar to cows, which we call chewing the cud. When they finish with that, they'll swallow the food finally, and it'll go into their second stomach, and it mixes with more juices, starts to really break down and ferment. And then they move it to their third stomach, where they can produce protein to keep themselves lovely and fit and healthy. Now, if we look at their toes, who am I going to use? This one here, maybe. Hopefully you can see they just have 2 toes on each foot. No hoof or anything, it's just a soft pad underneath, and on top of each toe is a nail that we trim for them every about 12 weeks. And a strange fact about alpacas is that their toenails match the colour of their gums. So if they've got pink toenails, they'll have pink gums, and if they've got black toenails, they have black gums. Don't know why, I'm guessing it's just a pigment thing. Now, of course, the most important thing, almost magical thing about alpacas is their fleece. And just like their camel cousins, it's designed to keep them cool on a hot day and lovely and warm on a cold day. So the recent snow we had really doesn't bother these girls. They just cush down like this, they lie on their tummy, tuck their legs up, and they stay lovely and warm. Now you can see why I put a picture of the fleece on. It's very short, my fingers normally disappear. But when I first touch an alpaca fleece, it's cold, and then all of a sudden it warms up. And that's because it's a hollow fleece. And on a hot day, if I push my fingers next to their skin, you can almost burn your fingertips, but they're used to running that hot and they can deal with it. Now, their fleece is also what we call hyperallergenic. So if you've ever put a woolly jumper on and it makes your skin itch, makes you all scratchy, alpaca fleece doesn't do that. So it's very good for anybody that's got any skin complaints, very good for young people. In fact, it's very good for anyone. And as you can see, our alpacas come in all different colours, from white to black and all the dark shades in between. And just so you know how special their fleece is, you'll also find it in firefighters' jackets. So when they're running around, it will keep them nice and cool. But if they go into a burning building, it will protect them from the really high heat. And because it is a natural fibre, it won't melt and stick to the firefighters if the jacket gets breached. So a very special fleece. Now, alpacas can live to about 30 years old. The average is about 22, 25. And our eldest is Leonie here, and she's 15. And our youngest is Pims here. Sorry, not Pims, Oreo. And this is Oreo. As you can see, she was jet black when she was born with a little white face and the name stuck. So that she got called Oreo. Now, you won't be able to hear at the moment because they're all being very chilled out, having a bit of a snooze, but normally they're humming to each other. And that hum is how they talk, how they communicate. And when it's low, that means they're happy. And if it gets a bit louder, that means they're getting a bit stressed. But they do lots of body language. So you'll see their tails move and their ears move, and that's how they communicate with each other. Now, if they get very annoyed with each other, remember I said they can bring up food and chew it again. They'll bring that food up and spit it at each other. Now, that's a very green, semi-digested mix. It's very stinky and it's very sticky. And normally we get caught in the crossfire. But most of the time, alpacas just like to be chilled out. They like to laze around and they just like being with other alpacas. They are a herd animal, so they do like to be around other alpacas. And they just love to chill out. And you may find alpacas, because they make very good guard animals, you may find them with chickens and with sheep, because they'll keep other animals away. And if you were in Peru, you'd find a much bigger llama looking after alpacas, because they'll keep much bigger animals away. So that's our alpacas, guys. If you've got any questions for me, please feel free to answer them, or ask them, and then I'll answer them.
Hi, so well, I've got a few questions. So the first one is, are they still used today for clothes?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Peru, their fleece is used for lots of clothing, and in the UK, there's quite a special fashion industry around alpaca fleece. There's a couple of companies that do some very high-end sort of clothing made from alpaca fleece, and actually it was the British that developed alpaca fleece into what it is today. So back in 1836, the Titus Salt worked out that if you mixed alpaca fleece with wool, you got a very strong material, and if you mixed alpaca fleece with silk, you got a very lustrous or shiny material. And that material was sold all over Europe to the nobility and to the royalty. And it was a very expensive material, and Queen Victoria is renowned for loving her alpaca dresses. She had quite a few made from lustrous material. So yep, it's still used today, and you can still I mean, I've got some lovely alpaca socks on, and they're lovely and warm.
Sounds lovely. And we've got another one. So how many alpacas do you actually have?
So we've got, we will have, so we've got 4 pregnant girls. When they give birth, we'll have 33, 35 alpacas. We're quite a small farm. Some have 100, maybe 150. And if you were in Australia, they have herds of 3,000.
Wow, that's a lot. Another question, do they make good pets?
They make very good pets. So you can have them as pets. You need a bit of space for them. And with alpacas, you need a minimum of 3. An ideal number is 5 because they do get a bit moody with each other. So they need a bit of space. But they make very good pets. They're really loving. And once they know you, they love cuddles and they love rubs. And of course, they act as really good lawn mowers. So you'd never have to cut your grass.
Wow. Do they have different personalities?
Absolutely, they are all their own little alpaca. So just like people, they all have different personalities. Some are cheeky, some are a bit shy. They all have best friends as well. So Annabelle here, who's having a bit of a chill out in the sun, she's not our eldest, but she definitely acts like herd mum. And Oreo, who I showed you earlier, who's just over there, she was an orphan and Annabelle was her auntie, so she looked after her. So Annabelle's a very special alpaca. She loved to check on the herd. They're all very inquisitive. They like to know what's going on, especially Pim's here coming to see what's happening. And they all know where my food's hidden. So sometimes you may see them duck down. They know I've got food in my pocket. But yeah, they all have different personalities, just like humans.
Fabulous. So another one we've got, do they like to live in groups or by themselves?
Oh, groups. They love to be in groups. They're more happy when they're in their group. So you can see they're all together now. And they love to be in groups. In fact, an alpaca on their own will get very, very upset. There's only one alpaca that I know lives on its own. And if you ask your parents or guardians to Google Alfie the alpaca, he lives in America and he lives with a family in the house. And there's videos of him sitting on the sofa. But normally, alpacas get very upset if they're on their own. And in fact, very, very, very stressed as well.
Bless them. And then the last one that we've got on the list is, what is the most common colour of alpaca?
So probably white, because the white fleece is more valuable. So certainly in Peru, they like to breed the white ones and the fawn coloured ones. And they breed the fawn ones because of history. So the Incas used to love the fawn colour because they would worship sun gods. And the fawn coloured alpacas represented the sun gods.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So that's all the questions that are on there at the moment. Yeah, that's all the questions that we've got so far.
And you might just be able to see our very friendly pheasants who come in here to eat up all the food that the alpacas drop.
Very nice.
And you can see, because the sun's out, they're having a bit of a sunbathe at the moment.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much for today. Oliver, do you want to maybe stop the live?